Hello. There's a few things that I didn't get time to talk to you about in the live, so I just wanted to cover those things in this video now that I'll stick on YouTube and you can watch at your leisure. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was microphone windshields, when we use them and what we use, and just to make sure that you kind of are aware of the basic construction of them. I'm sure you've all seen them on the TV, maybe you've actually seen them in person, but just to make you aware that the actual microphone kind of sits inside this basket, and this is hollow. You saw me take it apart earlier, so you know there's a suspension in there. And then the other element of the windshield is the fluffy cover, which I store inside out, because the fluff is obviously the important bit that actually breaks up the wind and stops that horrible low pitch rumble getting on the microphone. And actually it's best to avoid touching the fluff if you possibly can. It's turned into the Muppet Show, hasn't it? Whee! Excellent. And so obviously that goes over the basket. And we, would always use one of those outdoors, really. Unless it's very still, we'd kind of put the fluffy cover on almost regardless. But when you go inside, take it off again, because it's not really helping the performance of the microphone. You may find that if you've got a microphone on a boom pole, when you swing the boom without any cover on it at all, you'll get a little bit of noise then, just like wind noise. So it's best to kind of have a foam cover. If you haven't got a foam cover, then maybe keep the basket on. The other type of windshield that you might come across is this sort of thing, which just has a hole in it and slips over the microphone like that. Typically you see them on the top of video cameras and that sort of thing. Doesn't provide as much windshield protection as the full basket and brake coat, but it's a good option. It's a lot better than nothing, and is a lot cheaper than the full basket and windshield. So that's that. The next thing is looking after your personal microphones in terms of wind when you're outside. Obviously getting them under clothes can help in that respect, particularly hoodie or a fleece. Sweatshirts are good, polo shirts are pretty good, other fabrics are not so helpful to us. So the sort of things we can do if you've got a microphone mounted on the outside, it's much easier to put a windshield on. First type of windshield is just, I don't know how well you'll be able to see that. Maybe if I switch to the overhead camera you can see it better. Let's have a look. Where are we? Yeah, it's not really in focus. Oh, there we go. If I move that out of the way for now. So in the left hand is my microphone, and then a little windshield which goes on there. We call it a windshield. Actually, it won't give you much protection against wind at all. It's kind of useful if somebody is a bit poppy. By popping we mean that syllables like P and B pop on the microphone, so go P and B. And that's literally the wind from your mouth or nose getting on the microphone. Sometimes that happens when the microphone's in a very central position. If somebody is particularly prone to kind of nasal, don't know what to call it, not nasal discharge, that would be very unpleasant, but just kind of air being exhaled through their nose and it kind of gets on the microphone can be a bit poppy. So sometimes just moving it to the side, oh sorry, caught my mic, sometimes just moving to the side can sort that out. Or the other thing is turning the microphone upside down. That helps a lot with popping, and you sometimes see that on TV. Doesn't make any difference to the sound pickup, because as we discussed earlier, these personal microphones are omnidirectional, so the sound gets picked up all around. So the next stage on from that is you could have a bigger foam, let's go to the other camera again, a bigger foam windshield like this, and you can either put that on like that. I sometimes try to put them on over the metal windshield. I say metal, it's a metal cage with foam underneath. So if you can actually get that foam over the top, you've then kind of got two layers, and the metal creates a bit of a gap in the same way as our basket with the big microphone, the shotgun microphone, the same way the basket creates a gap between the microphone and the windshield, so that we get the same thing here. So that can be quite effective. Next stage up from there, which I've used a lot over the years, is keeping the metal windshield on again, is I've got this. That is actually a finger from a pair of fleecy gloves, children's gloves. I cut the finger off and just kind of stitched up the end so that it doesn't fray, basically. And then that kind of over, that can be quite good. Sometimes it's good if you can get an elastic band or something around the bottom to stop the wind going up inside. So that's another thing you can do. So moving on from there, there's things that you can buy which are little bits of fluff, rather like the windshield on the shotgun mic, which you can use with a bit of sticky tape to hold that in place. Sorry, microphone again. Hold that in place on somebody's costume. If you put that underneath the costume, you'll probably find that it would be a bit rustly. So that's one thing. And then going right up to these things, which you may have seen on TV, beloved of the sound supervisors on Winter Watch, Spring Watch, that sort of thing, and sometimes at Wimbledon as well you see them. I think they look hideous, but I guess if you've got to do an hour of live TV with presenters on personal mics, you're probably going to want that insurance against wind noise. So the way they work is that they come with a bit of foam, and the foam slips over the microphone. There's a kind of hole in the middle, and slips over there, and that creates the cavity I was talking about earlier, like the basket, and then the fluffy bit goes over the whole thing like that. Quite difficult to get a clip on once the fluff's in place. So that's that. That's kind of wind noise covered. There's lots of things you can buy these days that help you hide microphones. There's a company called Mic in the Netherlands, and they produce these little clips which are kind of like cages for your microphone. If we can see that there, I don't know if you can, how well you can see that, but that's kind of like a little funnel with air gaps in it, and you can actually slide where's my microphone? Slide a microphone in there, and that kind of holds the fabric under a costume away from it, and there's a little clip there, and you can clip it onto somebody's bra or something like that, and that would work quite well. I think that might actually be called a bra concealer. That one actually, it clips in just there. So there's things like that you can buy. That's a company called Mic. And my other top tip for hiding microphones is this little bag here, which is moleskin foot tape. So it's sticky on one side, really soft on the other, and it's designed for people that suffer from corns and that sort of thing. But because it's really soft, it's a really good thing to mount your microphone on. So you can literally, if I just pop it out of the bag here, you'll get a better idea of what I'm talking about. There we go, moleskin roll it's called there. So the shiny side is sticky and that just peels off. This side you can cut up into the size you need, and you can then use a second bit of moleskin, if you like, over the top, so you make like a sandwich with the moleskin top and bottom like that, and then use the sticky side of the moleskin to stick it under a t-shirt, something like that. That can be really effective because it gives the microphone a nice soft bed to sit in. So I think that was about it for microphone windshields and placement type things. So I shall clear these out of the way. It's like doing a Blue Peter make here. Okay, so that's that. The other thing that we didn't talk about very fully was levels and metering and that sort of thing. So I'm going to try and talk to you about that now very quickly, and we're going to use the Tascam DR60 to help us talk about those things. So a meter is just a visual way for us to see sound. It represents the volume of sound in a visual way, and here we can see examples of different meters. that you might encounter. So down the left hand side of the screen, that's the meter that you're most likely to encounter these days. That's a peak meter, a digital peak meter. You can see that the loudest point on there is 0 right at the top, and then it goes all the way down to -80 or something like that. That's kind of a similar meter to the one we've got on the Tascam DR60 that we'll look at in a minute. Just for a bit of history, the BBC developed their own meters years ago because those things didn't exist. You can see we've got an example of a stereo meter there, which has got 2 needles. You can see the red and the white. And then diagonally opposite in the second row is a mono BBC meter. You quite often see 2 of those side by side on a stereo mixer, something like that. They're the sort of meters that I grew up with, really fond of them. And they're constantly showing you the loudest signal. They're peak program meters, you know, so they're very descriptive. It's showing you the loudest signal at any one time. Then if we go back to bottom left, we've got a VU meter. They're very popular in the States. They're much cheaper than peak program meters to use. We always joke that VU stands for virtually useless, because it doesn't really tell you a great deal. The one thing that they are good for is they give you a good sense of the kind of overall loudness rather than peaks, how loud it kind of seems to you as a person rather than the actual maximum voltage, because that's what a meter is measuring. Ultimately, it's just voltage. So the top right, I'm not going to talk about too much, but that's quite a recent invention. That's a loudness meter, and that was developed a few years ago because of the issue we had about adverts sounding much louder than the programs, and they wanted to be able to kind of check that, make sure that everything sounded more consistent and we weren't reaching for the remote control to turn the adverts down all the time. So that's what that is. Reference levels is something that you need to talk about. We would line up, so if you're plugging a mixer into a camera, say, if you're plugging a mixer into a camera, then you need to kind of know the level coming out of your mixer lines up to a certain reference level on the camera. And the way we would do that is with some test tone. The test tone is traditionally a 1 kilohertz tone. I might drop in an example of 1 kilohertz test tone just so you know what that sounds like. There we go. Marvellous. And that would traditionally come up at the number 4 on our BBC meter. But if we're plugging our mixer with a nice BBC peak program meter into a camera, the camera won't have BBC meters. It will have something more like the big digital meter on the left hand side. And traditionally we would line up around -20, if you can see that about halfway on the meter. Strictly speaking, we should line up at -18, but it's very often -18 isn't marked on a camera. So we'll go Sony cameras in particular, which we see a lot of. They don't mark -18 for some reason. So we tend to go for -20 because it's a clear point there. So that's that. That's just, and that just means that we know what we're looking at on our mixer, and we know where that is on the camera as well. So we'll look at that with reference to the meters on the Tascam in a minute. Okay. Okay, so this bit is going to be a bit of a tour of the Tascam DR60, the audio recorder that you will use on location. So let's start with some real basics. Battery compartment at the back takes 4 AA's, a bit of ribbon that lifts the AA's. There we go. It will also take power from a USB connection, so you could plug a phone charger in, I believe, or a power bank, something like that in there. That would work. So power button is there. We press and hold. Okay, so we're powered up and ready to go. Let's start with inputs, because that's a straightforward way to go, isn't it? So you can see we've got two X we can use for microphones or line level sources, which would be mixers, that sort of thing. There's also some options to feed a camera, where I've got this cable plugged in here as a mini jack output that you could plug into a DSLR, and the volume for that is adjustable there. There's also a camera in, and the reason for that is if your camera has got a headphone output, you can plug that back in and you can leave your headphones plugged in here. In that one, there's your headphones and headphone volume above. Just making sure you can see that there, and you can actually monitor the audio from the camera from within the Tascam, which could be handy. But in reality, if you're using the Tascam with a DSLR, you're going to want to take the audio off the Tascam, which means doing a sync later on in your edit. And there's a few different ways of doing sync. There's software that will do it automatically for you. You can also do manual sync with a clapperboard, of course, if you've got a clapperboard. If you haven't got a clapperboard, there's a couple of things you can do. You can use what we call mic taps, and in that case we would literally hold the microphone at the camera like that, and we would do this. You know, this microphone isn't plugged into our source at the moment, so we don't hear it, but you would get a donk on the microphone as I do that, and you can use that as a reference point. The other thing, which is very commonly done, is a hand clap, which is really easy to do. The common mistakes that people make is that they just do a clap and it's not really very distinct or clear where it is. So the way to do that properly really is to do it side on, so that you can see very clearly the point when the hands meet. So we go clap, and we hold our hands together for a bit before we separate. Okay, so just making sure you can see that. Clap like that. The other important thing is make sure there's no other sound going on when that clap happens, because the way you will sync that is taking your audio from the DSLR camera, the audio from the Tascam, and you'll be looking for the peak in the waveform where the clap happens. If there's other noises going on at the same time, that peak won't be so clear, so you'll be fumbling about trying to find exactly where the point happens. Of course, you know, traditionally, you're lucky these days that we've got audio at all on DSLRs, even if it's not very good. Traditionally, when film didn't have sound at all, we would be lining up the picture of the clap to the sound of the clap, and there wasn't a visual reference on the camera at all. So that was harder, but relatively easy to do. You can, if there's no sync reference, you can sync up dialogue to lip movements. It's a bit of a fiddle, but you get there after a while. Okay, so back to the Tascam. The Tascam has another feature for sync, which I'll talk about later, this slate button here down by my thumb, and that actually puts the 1 kilohertz tone I was talking about earlier onto the camera and the Tascam SD card. So that's that kind of gives you an easy reference to find and to sync those two bursts of tone up to. I didn't talk about the SD card, which is over on this side where we turn it on. If we pull this rubber cover up, there is SD card slot there, so that goes in there. Cover back over. We were talking about inputs, weren't we? So we've got our XLR inputs here where our microphone is going to go in. I will just give you an example of how we would work if we were working with sound on camera rather than the separate sound recorded on the Tascam. So if we were doing that, we might have something a bit like this mixer here. No recording capabilities on this mixer. It purely takes your microphone signals and enables you to combine 3 different microphone signals into a stereo output. So if I plug my cable into input 1 here and the output of the mixer there, power that mixer on. So up in the top right hand corner we've got this switch which says mic on one direction, which gives you a little built-in microphone in the mixer that you can use to ident things on your recording. The other way it says 1K, which is our 1 kilohertz test tone that we talked about earlier. So if I turn that on, we won't hear it for now, I don't think, but we'll see it on the meters. So there we go, we got it on the mixer really clearly, but also on the Tascam here. If we have a look here, I hope you can see that here. We've got very similar setup to what we would have on a camera. Beneath the volume control here, we've got this three-way selector switch, which you'll find on pretty much every camera. You can see on the left-hand side, well maybe you can't, but I'll describe it for you. This setting on the left-hand side says line, which is line level for when you're plugging a mixer in. The next setting is microphone. Let me turn that tone off for a moment. Microphone, which would work for our dynamic microphones that don't need phantom power that we talked about earlier. And then the right-hand side is mic and phantom power, which is the setting you're going to need. You can see, as I mentioned in the live stream, it asks you to confirm that you want to use phantom power, and you just push the data wheel to say yes, we've got phantom power running. But for the purposes of this demo, when we're talking about if this were a camera and plugging a mixer in, we want line level, and we'll turn our tone on like that. And you can see we've got it very clearly on the LEDs on the mixer, but we've also got it on the Tascam here. And if we turn it up, you can see that the bar goes up towards that downwards triangle that I was talking about, which is quite a handy reference point. And also under where it says slate there, just above my finger, it gives you an actual figure, which I think is saying -16 without my glasses. If we could back it down, it will, there we go, it's gone down to -20, is that? So that wouldn't be a bad reference point actually. If we could find -20, then that would be quite good. So that's not something that you need to worry about immediately, but it's good to know these things, and I wanted to give you an idea of how we would go about lining up a mixer to a camera or a separate audio recorder. So that's that, and we'll now carry on with talking about the things you really need to know about the Tascam DR60. So we've powered on our Tascam DR60. Let's have a look at some of the menu settings before we get into recording. If we go into our menu, see we've got a record mode first, and this is the thing where I was talking about earlier, where you can set it up to record the same input, the same microphone on two different channels, but one at a slightly lower level. So if we go in, if we select record mode with the data wheel, it then moves across to mono, and if we scroll we can record in stereo. So if we had a stereo microphone or two sources that we were going to plug into channels 1 and 2, we could use that. Or dual mono. Dual mono for a mono source is the setting we were talking about. It will give you two tracks of audio. One will be 6 dB lower than the main one, so channel 2 will be 6 dB lower. So if at any point you get a peak that distorts, you can always go to track 2 and use that audio instead, and hopefully that will be good. So I recommend you use that when you're just using your boom microphone or a personal microphone as one source. Other than that, you can use dual stereo, which is like the twin track mode I was talking about. So if you wanted to record the personal stereo, sorry, the personal microphone or and the shotgun on two separate tracks, you could use that. And then there's a 4-channel mode on this as well, which enables you to kind of record some extra sources on the 4 channels using this mini jack 3/4 input here. I can't quite imagine of a scenario where you might do that, but I guess it could be useful at some point. So that's that. If we press menu, it takes us back to our main menu, and we can go to input settings here. So the first, did we cover everything in record mode? No, we did. Yeah, that just gives us an overview there. Don't worry about MS mode, because that is kind of far too advanced and nobody does it anymore anyway. Input settings, So gain is the same as our volume controls, really, just gives us a kind of coarse sensitivity setting. So if something is too loud and you can't compensate on the volume control, you could select low here for channel 1, or if something is too quiet and you, even when it's turned all the way up, it's still not loud enough, then you could go to high. I recommend starting with mid. Mid seems to work quite well in the few tests I've done with this. Okay, limiters, they'll help with that digital distortion. They will just kind of limit the level coming in and try and stop that digital distortion. There's a limit to how effective they are, no pun intended, and if you drive your input too hard, then eventually it will distort anyway, but there's a little bit of protection there. Low cut filters, or high pass filters they're also known as, they can be useful for getting rid of traffic rumble, wind noise like we were talking about earlier. You can do that if you've got wind. It can help alleviate that. It won't get rid of it completely, but it can make it a bit more tolerable. You can also do that in your edit though. You can apply those filters in your edit, so I very often leave that to the edit, because if you can leave it to a point where you can listen on loudspeakers without background noise and stuff, it's better to make that judgment later. So there we go. If we go back, menu, record settings, format. Okay, so there's lots of different formats. 24-bit is a bit better quality than 16-bit. Broadcast wave file, BWF, I wouldn't worry about that. That's kind of all more advanced than we need to worry about. 16-bit WAV will be fine for us. Sample rate is quite important. 48K is the right one to be on. 44.1 is CD quality, but 48K is the standard for film and TV. Less important now that editors, not editors, but editing software, they'll all kind of deal with multiple formats now, so it's not quite so important. Size is the maximum file size. I wouldn't worry about that. There's a timer option and monitors, and there's a pre-record option, which is quite useful actually. I didn't realise that. What that will do is it will actually record a little bit of audio before you actually hit record, so that can be good if you're late turning over. Tone volume minus 18 dB, like I was talking about earlier. That's the standard line-up level that we use. So we'll go back. Auto record I wouldn't worry about, and then there's playback settings, which I wouldn't worry about because you'll do your playing back in the edit generally. There's a browse function which enables us to play back audio. We'll have a proper look at that in a minute when we've actually recorded something. So that's good. Let's plug a microphone in. Got one here. So this is our shotgun microphone. So what is it going to need? It's going to need phantom power, Steve, because it's a capacitor condenser mic. Let's turn that volume down first. Okay, turn on phantom power. Yeah, I'm sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's metering a bit low there, if you can see that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Hey, 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 1, 2. So we'll turn that up. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 2, 3, 4. So it's kind of peaking round about where that downward triangle is. That's quite a handy visual reference point for us. So we're looking good. We're ready to do our first take. So in order to do that, we have to hit record once, twice, and we're recording. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Hey, hey, hey. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm also going to give you a demonstration of this slate option, which is helpful when it comes to sync. So when you go into a take, you can have a burst of tone at the start, and it's then really easy to find that and sync up all your takes after the event. So here we go with that. Beautiful. You have to press and hold that. It doesn't toggle on and off, it's a press and hold thing. Okay, so I'm going to stop recording and we'll try and listen back to our audio. So in order to play back a recording, you go back into the file menu and select the browse option with the data wheel. and then it will give you a list of your files. So you scroll with the data wheel to the file that you want to play back and you click on the data wheel. And we're recording 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12. Hey hey hey, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. I'm also going to give you a demonstration of this slate option, which is helpful when it comes to sync. So when you go into a take, you can have a burst of tone at the start, and it's then really easy to find that and sync up all your takes after the event. So here we go with that. Beautiful. You have to press and hold that. It doesn't toggle on and off, it's a press and hold thing. Okay, so I'm going to stop recording and we'll try and listen back to our audio. So there we go, that pretty much covers it. I think we've gone all the way through plugging in a microphone or even a mixer into the Tascam, and we've got our phantom power working, and we've set some levels, and we've recorded a take and played it back. So hopefully that gives you pretty good starting point, and you can look back at this reference when you're planning your shoot and when we can finally get out there filming again. Good luck.